Welcome to Vlogmas, day 10.
This is a Vlogmas video I really didn't want to make, but here I am. And there you are. I made this clear from the very beginning that the first time I attempted to do Vlogmas, my brother died during the process, my youngest brother. And so that knocked me off the Vlogmas train. That was 4 years ago, and this is the first time I'm attempting it again. I decided to take today as to include talking about sibling grief, which I think we don't talk about enough, and also the way that grief changes over time and how we change as people who are left after our loved ones die, what happens and doesn't happen and might happen in our lives. I may also veer into expectations we have of ourselves and others. So I'm gonna grab my notes. I really want to go outside. Maybe I'll go outside. What's your vote? Okay, I'm gonna head outside even if I get cold. And here are my notes. I'm gonna go off my notes because as a writer sometimes I pre-jot when I'm going to write something, and also when I want to speak something, sometimes writing helps me. And since this is a story of grief, that's a good thought for you too. This morning when I crossed the intersection of Gumtree Corner Road and Ye Great Street, I should have known something was up. The only thing was I could not see the name of that intersection as I drove past. But it was definitely something that my brother would have cooked up. When I found out that Joe died on December 10th, 2021, I was sitting outside a theater. I was about to go in and see a show. And instead of going in to see the show, I sat outside on a bench, and unlike this one that I'm sitting on now, and just sat with the disbelief that he was gone and that I hadn't had a chance to see him because I was across the country at the time. He was in California, in Southern California, and I was in Northwest New Jersey. At the time, I truly believed that he was going to make it through. I couldn't believe that I wouldn't be able to see him again. Never in my wildest dreams thought my baby brother would die before me. I had already lost my brother directly below me. My brother directly below me had Down syndrome, and people with Down syndrome tend to have shorter lifespans and life expectancies. But my brother Joe it was completely unexpected for me. Maybe not for other people, but for me it was completely unexpected. Noticed it with both my brothers' deaths. But because John was quote-unquote special, that was different anyway. When Joe died, I no longer lived among any of my childhood friends who knew Joe. None of my current circle of friends knew him. My current circle of friends really don't and did not know many of my family members. I think that makes it perhaps harder, just because not trained. We are clearly not trained about death and grief and loss. Sometimes I blame this on the Puritans. I've done a lot of research on grief, and one thing I learned about the Puritans is that they felt that grieving was a sin, and that if you grieved openly and honestly, that you were seen as being disrespectful or disobedient to God. What I would like to say to my Puritan forebears is even Jesus wept. So when Joe died right before Christmas, it was rough. And his funeral was on December 18th, 8 days later. By a miracle, I was able to be there. By a second miracle, I invited my cousin to go with me as my emotional support person, and my son Samuel was able to come with me as the child of mine who was able to be there. It was hard. I literally had flown into Bakersfield, and then I had to drive from Bakersfield to San Diego. If any of you know geography in California, that's a long drive. And it's a long drive. You have to go through Los Angeles to get there, unless you want to cut around. But it was a long drive, even longer for Darcy, who came down from Fresno. My cousin, Darcy. Some things about grief. When you've grieved once, you've grieved once. When you've grieved twice, you've grieved twice. When you grieve 3 times, you've grieved 3 times. Every single time you grieve, you're going to grieve differently. I think this is one of the challenging things for people who are very linear in thought, is that we get a grief checklist. And I think that's why people so appreciate Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. The only thing with those stages of grief is they are a fallacy. Kubler-Ross wrote those for people who were dying, not for those who are grieving the loss of the people who are dying. Grief is not a straight line. Grief is a up and down, swirling whirlpool of who the heck knows what. One of the challenges when you're someone like me who loves hard and deep is that the more people who you love, the more losses you have. So in one way you get better at it, or at least you get better at the understanding of grief. I don't think you ever get better at grief. And each time there is a grief experience, experts say that you kind of go back over your old griefs again. And I would rather not do that. I think it was 2 videos ago I talked about joy and grief, because ironically, as I say these things, there also can be joy in grieving when you get to a certain point. One of my friends has a podcast called Grief and Happiness. And just because you're grieving doesn't mean you have to turn off all happiness. In fact, I suggested a ritual of lighting a candle at the holiday table, which is a very simple grief ritual that may help you through the holidays, to at least acknowledge one-on-one that the person you love is not there. You can bring them there by simply lighting a candle silently on your own before the holiday festivities or parties or whatever it is begins. You can do that on your own. And you can do something different every year. And if you're the host, you're in charge. And if you're a guest, you can make requests. Oh, okay. When I said that, the wind just blew. So apparently I'm not supposed to say that last bit. Wow, that was intense. That was very intense. I want to end with 2 things. The first is that none of us will escape grief. None of us. And the second is, whether you are the person grieving or the person supporting the person who is grieving, there is no right or wrong way to grieve. And the most important thing I believe you can do is to stand with that person, sit with that person, be with that person. The griever cannot get grief wrong, and they will remember whether you stand by them or whether you leave their side. I recommend standing, holding space for them. And finally, I find it kind of ironic, 2 things. One is that when Joe died, I was in the midst of teaching a class about grief in the holidays. I made up an online course, Zoom / me adding videos kind of course. And so in the middle of that, I had to say, oh, my brother died. And I kept teaching. The second thing is, people, since I had my first major loss, which was my first daughter was stillborn when I was 8.5 months pregnant. And following that experience, I was encouraged to become like a grief expert, because naturally when I experience something, I study it and I research and I learn. As a way I heal. I heal by learning. And I heal by supporting others who are going through a similar experience. And one of the reasons why I never have become a quote-unquote grief expert is because I would rather continue to be an ordinary person who grieves, supporting other people who are grieving, rather than someone who makes her whole life about grief. I hope that makes sense. I ironically am joyful that I was brave enough to make this video. The one thing that I did not tie in a bow, and I'll tie it now, the reason that I mentioned the sweet gum tree or Sweet Gum Road, or that road is called, Sweet Gum Tree Corner, is that, so the day after Joe died, I went back to the college where the play was that I was supposed to see. And I was in my tree hugging era then. So I went to a forested area near that college. And I was tromping around in the woods, as I'm known to do. And I noticed a sweet gum tree seed ball. And I was amazed by it. And I found one and then another and then another, and eventually I had 6 in my hand. This morning on my morning walk, I had not noticed the name of that street. And out I was walking in this brand new unfamiliar place. So many sweet gum tree seed balls. And at first, I didn't believe that these were actually sweet gums, because sweet gums are my favorite tree in Bakersfield, and I find them incredibly comforting. I love them. They are not very common in the Northeast or the Northwest New Jersey. The climate down here is better for them. And if I went to a place I'd never been to, I found holly and ivy. I found a really strange memorial. And I found sweet gum pods. They're in my pocket, and there they will stay. I used the first sweet gum pods that I found when Joe died the day after, and I used them in a children's sermon. Still have them. So love the people you love well every day. Love the people you love well every day. And I will see you on the next Vlogmas video. So grateful you're here. And the world is a better place simply because you exist in it.